Yep. No, actually, you. Have you had that one yet? You want that one? Okay, we just about ready. You like your new chairs? Just wondering.
No.
Yes. See, some would be happy, some would not.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Certain people are discovering how to work.
I need a different chair. This is not-
But now that you.
That's a Mark Boychuk figured that out thing.
Okay, yes, I like it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I will call the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting of Peace River Town Council to order March 4th at 5 p.m. We have the agenda in front of us. Are there any additions or deletions?
I have none, your worship, thank you.
Thank you. Can someone care to propose Councillor Ford?
You want me to read it? I'll put a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as presented.
Any discussion? All those in favor? It is carried. Next up, we have minutes of the February 5th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. You've had those in front of you. Anybody notice any edits that should happen? Someone care to propose a motion? Councillor Good?
I'll move that council adopt the minutes of the February 5th, 2024 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor? It is carried. Thanks. Comments from the public? Not yet. Presentations, we don't have any. However, we do have for bylaws and policies, we're the draft camping bylaw with Mrs. Bell.
Thank you, your worship. The bylaw presented before council this evening, excuse me, is the proposed draft camping bylaw. This was I'm sorry, I have a cough drop in my mouth at the same time as trying to speak. Presented to council for review at the November 2023 governance priorities meeting. Since that time, we've had legal review the proposed bylaw, and as you can see attached, they have provided some thoughts and feedback on some adjustments and changes. All extremely important and valid, and quite frankly, we appreciate that. Sorry, legal review. Just a note on the sections, we're being very my brain is not fully functioning today. This bylaw specifically is in regards to camping. The bylaw allows for special events through other mechanisms, through special events permits. It's not to deal with those situations where we might have for example, if we have a carnival come to town and they might require some camping on site for security, there's mechanisms in the bylaw to allow us to allow those situations to occur. Excuse me. The other component of this bylaw does not deal directly with the procedure for addressing encampments or other situations. That is a separate process and not as part of this particular bylaw. However, this bylaw would allow a mechanism for any of our peace officers, our CMP, or other individuals with the ability under the bylaw to enforce to have a mechanism to be able to do so. Because currently we do not have a mechanism to address this particular issue in any of our public spaces. And we have had issues in the past, and we'd like to have a mechanism for staff to utilize going forward. Any comments, questions?
Councillor Good and then Councillor Ford.
I may have missed something here, but there was a line that was crossed out which talked about a shelter. The first part where it says camping is or any form of a tent, whatever, or form of temporary or portable shelter, but it excludes under the open sky. The part about under the open sky was a sleeping bag. would not be a tent or a structure, I would think.
Are correct.
And,
We
just,
may
I
need
think
to
that
add
might be an
that.
oversight.
Yeah, we may, I hear exactly what you're saying. Because if we focus very much on the tent and the use of some sort of shelter as opposed to situations where there are no shelters.
In
Yeah.
certain seasonal periods.
Yeah.
There's not the same need for that.
Correct. And we've had situations where it hasn't been a tent per se that's been set up. It's just been,
Covered with.
Yes. Yeah. So we can look at adding back in that some language around,
Pull up under your picnic table at the events park.
yeah. Okay,
Councilor Ford?
I had read this, where was it again, or unless I'm misreading, that if you do have somebody that breaks the bylaw, there's a allotted amount of time that they have to move? Or was it like 12 hours, 24 hours? I just can't find that now.
Section 7,
We got seizure and inspections, but,
enforcement. I don't think we have a timeline in, we had in a previous version. But if the bylaw states you are not to be here camping, we can enforce it immediately.
Okay,
Is there, am I missing something? Your worship?
sorry, Kayla had Ms. Parsons?
Sorry, if you just note on the request for direction, sections of note 7A and B, it does kind of address that notice period.
Mhm.
More leaving it open for the bylaw peace officer
To address.
to address.
Yeah. And we have had situations where we wanted an individual, for example, set up an encampment at the water park. In the water park, that we needed them to move immediately, because of that. It's not a great place to be camping when you have your facility open to families and young children and the like.
so, okay, so with that being said, we had, if you want to call it an encampment, that was in the events park
Correct,
that kind of caught fire.
yes,
So would this address that encampment?
correct, yeah. It's
Okay.
town property or leased property by the town for the purposes of public spaces, yes.
Okay, so that answered my next question, because with the notice of motion that I had put in, if we end up leasing the property between the property line and the river, then those encampments could be taken down immediately because it's on public property.
With the bylaw would cover, yeah, if we have leases or town, direct town owned property, we would be able to enforce the bylaw on those.
Okay, the reason why I asked was just because the term when you had presented used the word encampment, doesn't address encampment, but it does address encampment on town property.
On town property,
Deputy Mayor?
I just want to clarify, so in a circumstance, I know sometimes the ski hill will have an event, like a wedding or something, and they let people park there with their RVs and that. So can you just confirm then that there is going to be some leeway there or measures in place that in some circumstances it would be acceptable or?
yeah, so for example, in that particular case, we leased the property to a nonprofit organization. They would have to abide by all town bylaws, so in that case, they would have to request a permit to be exempted for that particular situation or event or whatever they're hosting.
But there are mechanisms, so.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Councilor Ford?
With that being, there again, with that comment, is there any cost to a not-for-profit group to apply for that permit?
No,
So if you go back to inspections and seizures, this section 7, so this discussion here, so something will need to be added in there that, about the open sky idea. Because if somebody has a sleeping bag and there they be,
yeah,
how does they're not entering anything and something wordy there.
Well,
An
it,
umbrella.
it would be covered by the statement of enter any, tent, shelter or on, or in any highway, town right of way or public place.
But they're not.
So those public places is if you're in it, just under a blanket or whatever your situation is, the public places you're entering into it.
Camping,
Yes,
and
100%. We do have to change that.
that's what I'm saying, camping, the definition of camping doesn't cover sleeping under open sky or
Currently.
blanket.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
so you would put it there and then the
Correct.
rest would follow.
that's right.
Okay, other, Counselor, Wojciech?
There's also a difference between camping and encampment. They're two completely different things as well. So encampment's a group of tents, generally those experiencing homelessness. And camping is just somebody outside setting up a tent to enjoy the area. They should be defined accordingly. Or maybe even remove encampment right out of this, no camping, sleeping.
Yeah,
Would be the better way to go in my opinion.
yeah, and that's what the intent of this bylaw is, specifically camping or shelter in any form, whether it's a group of tents or one or an individual or more than that. It's not a specific encampment bylaw, it's a sleeping in public places bylaw. So should address groups of people tenting versus an individual tenting. We don't define, nor we're saying no one, period.
Counselor Ford?
So just to, further comment on Councillor Wojciech's remarks. So I had sent out a report from, I think it was Dawson Creek, BC, about 6 months ago, when it was specifically talking about encampments. So encampments, whether it's 5 tents in a public place or 1 tent in a public place. So let's say this is happening when it's 30 below out. And I know there's a bit of a human rights issue to it, because if your shelter is full, do you have even if it's on public property, do you have the right to remove those individuals if they don't have a place to go?
And we've had a conversation with Sagatawa and the Out of the Cold shelter. And to date, they have not had a overcapacity situation.
No.
So they have capacity, and that's the component of any bylaw is your discretion of your individual who's enforcing the bylaw. And they would have to inquire as to the status of the shelter and dealing with situations. And that leads to that procedural component that's not within the bylaw. And we're going to be setting up conversations, including Sagatawa and the mobile outreach team, street team, and the RCMP, and having a conversation about that process or the procedure around addressing individuals, so that we are providing information, resources, other options to individuals, but also making it clear that, you know, sleeping and camping within our public spaces for the larger public community is not acceptable.
So so that would be dealt with basically on a case by case. If the shelter's at capacity,
Then we'll have. to
then it
address
would be addressed on a case by case basis.
I believe that would be the process, yeah.
Answered my questions.
Any other discussion? Okay, so to move, or give direction to administration, perhaps someone would propose a motion, Councillor Ford?
Yes, I'd put a motion on the floor, your worship, to move that council direct administration to bring the proposed camping bylaw forward to the next regular meeting for consideration.
And that gives the idea that the discussion is part of that. Do you need to say anything? Okay, good. All those any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? It is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bell. Next up, no unfinished business, so new business, timeline and process for the budget 2025 with Director Mugford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council. Mayor and Council requested a timeline and process for the 2025 budget. Beginning with the current, we do have a budget policy. The current policy states that there's a required 3-year operating and 5-year capital budget, which must be approved every year to authorize expenditures. And that's set out in the MGA under sections 242 and 242 through 249 and section 283. So the town's budget process policy P1283A is attached as part of the minutes. And under the current policy, there is, I included a screenshot of it here. But high level in July, August, the budget guideline preparation occurs, assumptions from go before council for approval. We receive all the inputs from our staff. The opportunity for public and citizen engagement through a variety of means occurs. Then in September, October, the submission of budget information occurs. It's reviewed by myself and the finance manager, and we calculate our revenues or taxes, salary information, etc. October, November, the budget workshop. So I have a budget workshop with council. Senior administration reviews the revisions. The past couple of years, CEO Miller and myself have met with directors. We've gone through kind of the line by line, yeah, as I said, that all occurs typically in the timeline of the budget that would occur October, November, and then November, December, that would be when it would be brought before council. And this is where we've differed in the past year. In the policy, it says in December, there's a presentation of the interim budget for approval. And then January, February is when the budget is approved in its final form by council. In 2023, so I'll just walk through what the 2024 budget or happened last year looked like. Administration drafted the 2024 operating and capital budget in July, August. On August 9th, council was invited to attend a budget workshop to discuss the operating service levels, propose new positions, and other changes impacting the operating budget. These changes were implemented and the operating budget was drafted in September. Myself, the other directors and the CAO meetings were held in October. The operating budgets were presented to council on November 13th and the 27th for tax supported, and November 6th and December 4th for the utility supported. Capital budget was presented on the 27th of November and December 4th. These budgets were all, they're included as part of the information package for, at the council and house event on December 7th, and all budgets were approved on December 11th, along with the 5-year capital plan and the 3-year operating plan. So by passing all final budgets on December 11th, council administration successfully met the requirements as set forth in both the policy and the MGN. Additionally, council approved the utility rates bylaw to be effective January 1st, meaning there was no delay in capturing the full effect of that rate increase. So in previous years, if the utility budget was delayed, approved, quite often that would lead to a delay in the approval of the rates, and then we're not capturing that full year of rate increases. So that leads to a little bit of revenue loss. So for the 2020, looking forward to 2025 budget, what I've proposed is a tentative schedule, which again council can consider and discuss. In the spring, I'd like to bring forth revisions to the 5-year capital 3-year operating plan. There wasn't a huge amount of time for council to deliberate and discuss when that was brought before you in December. So we think it would be good to bring that forward earlier in the year for again a more robust discussion. July, August, we'll meet with council to discuss the assumptions that go into the budget and begin the process of receiving input from the staff. Now, you say begin the process. The way that our budget software Questica works is we've opened up 2025 through to 2028. So as we work through the year, our staff are able to go in, make comments, they're able to make changes to future year budgets. All of those are open. The only one that's locked down is our current year, what we're in. So the process is ongoing. Getting asked. We're looking at September, October for the budget promotion process. So again, we receive input from our managers. They promote it up to a director level, and then it goes on from there. So that process will occur September, October, along with the senior administration review and revisions. And then October, November will be when we bring that back. We bring it to council for your first look, an opportunity for discussion, deliberation over several public meetings. And then November, December, we'll be looking at, again, having some type of an avenue for the public to provide information through an open house and additional discussion with council. And then bring both the operating capital budgets for final approval before council in December. So we're looking again, first regular meeting of council in December is the target. Along with approval of the utility rates bylaw and approval of the operating capital plan at that time as well. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Councilors, any questions? So just one from me, the November, December information provided at public open house to allow for additional input from the public. And in December, at the same time, we're then approving it. Is that enough time for the public to have input and us to digest or admin to digest whatever the input is from the public?
I mean, again, I guess that's up to council, depends on what the feedback is.
Yeah.
You know, and I wasn't in attendance at the event on December 7th. I was the previous year. Didn't really receive many questions or comments from the public. There was more interest on what was slated for the capital program. 2 years ago, we did the democracy exercise, and so there's a fair bit of feedback on that, but there wasn't anything that we received that would have changed our operating budget as it was prepared.
Good, well, I like the idea that once again in December, we would have approved the next year's budget so that staff can start doing the work of that, implementing that budget process. But any further comments, questions of Mr. Rutherford? Okay, so does the policy need to be changed at all if we're looking at this? Because the policy does say January, February presentation and approval of the final budget. So
I mean, we can discuss whether or not we want to make a change to that. Like the MGA sets basically what your minimum requirements are. If you happen to get it done sooner, then we're not. I don't think there's any harm in that. If we change the policy to say we must have it done by December 31st, and then the situation caused council to not want to do that and instead pass it into a budget, then we're in violation of policy. So again, we can have a discussion around that.
okay, I just would hope that council somehow looks at this and said, oh no, it's really December that we're trying to get all this done by. You know, that effect, but CEO Miller?
My suggestion would be if you'd like the policy changed to reflect a different timeline, then we do so.
Okay, Councillor Sternberg?
Maybe it's an opportunity where we say in the policy, we say council may, and then put our current practice, but then leave in council shall and have the old practice, which is I believe the floor for what the MGA is. So our policy isn't, kind of overshooting and then allows for flexibility, but also gives a prescribed method.
I don't want to make it a complicated process here. So my personal wish would be that somehow it's indicated that December is the aim to have the budget approved. So if that maybe could just be reflected even in a motion that says that. But anybody have strong feelings on any of this?
No.
Councilor Ford?
Not a strong feeling, but just going back to the director's comments. So right now, we're striving to have all of that done by December, but the MGA goes by the minimum. And the policy says January, so I don't think, just myself personally, I don't think you need to change anything, especially if we're striving to do it, to have it all done in December. The way the policy is written is just to the minimum of what, the MGA has stated. If I'm correct.
Deputy Mayor?
I was just going to ask you, Madam Mayor, when you say December, so your goal is to make sure it's clear to us that December is done, not just review or, I agree with that, but if Councillor Ford's idea worked, I guess we wouldn't have to, but I see what you mean and I agree with that actually.
Yeah, and the only reason why I say that is there might be a circumstance, an unforeseen circumstance that comes up with administration that it might, never know, maybe somebody gets sick or something. And it can't be done by a certain deadline. So at least you have the minimum to fall back on, even though we strive to have it done in December so that we're not doing those interim budgets in January.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I started in almost a year and a half ago now. And CEO Miller started a month after me. If we had been held to that standard of we must have it done by the end of December, I think the 2023 budget would have been much lower quality. So sometimes there is no offense. Like we needed that time to go through it and then get that level of comfort. So again, it's the MGA, as I said, it sets kind of what the floor is, a minimum standard. But there could be a time in the future where there's turnover, or there's medical issues, so there's any number of things that could cause a potential delay, and it's good that council has the ability to pass an interim budget and allow administration a bit more time.
Okay, our CAO Miller?
I think, Madam Mayor, that you'll probably gain some comfort level that you'll see them coming each year as our operating plan becomes more and more refined. We're just building that, right, really? And so as it becomes more and more refined, you're gonna find future budget discussions are gonna be limited numbers to discuss, because you have your base budget, there's things we can't change. And so then we're gonna actually, I think, as soon as you become more and more familiar with the operating plan and they become more defined, it's gonna be second nature anyways, that they're gonna be adopted sooner than later. It's my opinion anyways.
No, I appreciate that. I also really appreciate the thought process that December is the time. So January, February, those tenders are going out into the business world and things are starting to, be implemented. That's where I'm coming from on this. So any further new comments? Okay, there's a proposed motion that council accept the briefing note regarding the timeline and process for the 2025 budget for information. I'm here to put forth that. Councillor Carr, opposed? All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. Okay, same chair. We're now on to town reserves, Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The town's current reserve allocation and presentation within the audited financial statements are not in line with the existing reserve policies. Policy is P1225B, which I attached as part of these minutes, along with excerpts from the financial statements are included in this document. So the reserve policy was approved on May 10th, 2021, and established several discretionary and dedicated reserves. So some of the discretionary reserves include a mill rate stabilization reserve, general operating reserve, water wastewater operating reserve, general capital reserve, and water wastewater capital reserve. There's also dedicated reserves, which include public use, recreation, land reserve, museum acquisition reserve, landfill post-closure reserve, offsite levy reserve, neighborhood infrastructure renewal, and safe communities initiative. So that policy was put in place. Town's financial statements as part of the audit were never changed to reflect that policy. So if you look at note 13, this is an excerpt from the 2022 audited financial statements, you'll see the reserves that are on there don't align with the names of the reserves that I just listed off. So administration, as an exercise, took the existing reserves as presented in the financial statements and grouped them into, basically aligned them with what the current policy says it should be. So you can see that the restricted surplus of $12,472,499 from the financial statements, I've regrouped these into basically the names of the different funds that's in line with policy. Couple of things to note: the existing balances in the targeted funds failed to meet the targeted amount. So the policy says that, as an example, the mill rate stabilization fund should be 8% of the annual tax levy. We don't have reserves sufficient to fully meet that target. Additionally, there is a significant unrestricted deficit on the town's financial statements as of December 31, 2022. So I just wanted to point that out as well, that that $4,031,521, that's an unrestricted deficit. So we have dedicated and discretionary reserves, but there is an unrestricted deficit as well.
So what does that mean, unrestricted deficit?
Well, in short, we haven't fully funded our reserves.
So it's a deficit because the reserves aren't fully funded. That one?
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
So administration, our intention is to modify the names of the reserves to be in line with policy for our 2023 financial statements. So those will be coming before council on before May 1st for approval. This will require modifying the reserve balances in 2022 and 2023 so that we have a good comparable over year. So that'll bring us in line with the existing policy. In addition to that, we'd like to bring and have a discussion around changes to that reserve policy. So as part of our beginning with our 2023 budget process, administration shifted the town's accounting and budgeting process for operating transactions to tax supported and utility supported funds. Previously, that distinction wasn't made. So now we've got 5 funds within the town's general ledgers. There's tax supported general fund, water fund, wastewater fund, storm sewer fund, and solid waste fund. So administration will be bringing forth changes to the reserve policy for discussion consideration, which would be intending to be in effect for the 2024 year end. So for next year, or the current year's financial statements, which would be authored and adopted council next year. So a few proposed changes for council to consider would be the creation of dedicated water, wastewater, storm sewer, and solid waste reserves. So each one of those funds would have its own dedicated reserve so that any surplus or deficit in each one of those funds would be accounted for in that reserve. Within the tax supported capital, creating a separate reserve for buildings and engineered structures and vehicle machinery and equipment. So building and engineered structures typically have a much longer useful life. You're planning for them, quite often a decade or more in advance, and you're expecting them to be around for 30, 40, 50 plus years. Whereas vehicles, machinery, and equipment typically have a much shorter life cycle. So it makes sense to have separate reserves for those types of assets. We're also proposing the creation of a disaster recovery program reserve. So in the event that the town experiences a disaster that would be eligible to apply on that prevention program, we would have a reserve available to meet basically our share of that 90-10 match. We're also proposing the elimination of the mill rate stabilization reserve and the elimination of the Safe Communities Initiative reserve. So I included just a screenshot of what that structure would look like. And I guess the request for council this time is from administration would be to bring the 2023 financial statements in line with the existing reserve policy and bring such adjustments forward to council meeting for a formal resolution. Further, that council direct administration to draft changes to the reserve policy to bring the town in line with their current fund accounting format. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Counselors? Deputy Mayor, or, pardon me, Counselor Ford.
That's her.
I know I'll get straight up.
Just, I'm just curious about the elimination of the Safe Communities Initiative. So currently there's what is it, 186,540 in that reserve?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
So those funds that are sitting there are some of those funds, are they able to be used for that? Because I know when we were talking about the septet stuff and the changes to the planters downtown where they were thinking about putting wrought iron fencing around them, wouldn't those funds be used for a project like that rather than eliminating?
They certainly could be. Again, if you look at the purpose, on page 26 of the documents, that's where it has the purpose and source of funding for that Safe Communities Initiative. So the purpose was to fund public safety initiatives, and the source of funding was proceeds from traffic enforcement initiatives. So my understanding is the intention of that was basically whatever our CPOs are collecting, that money would then be put back into a fund to be used for public safety initiatives. I'm not saying that that's not a good cause or good use of funds. It could be captured through a more general reserve.
So I think the reserve started when we had the, what do you call it, like Whitecourt has,
Photo.
photo radar. The thought was, okay, you can have photo radar providing you use the, any revenues from it to, have education, et cetera, about public safety and that sort of thing.
It had to be used for safe communities.
But that looks like more than something must have been added that way. That program itself was not too successful money-wise.
You're talking the program wasn't successful as far as the photo
radar.
radar? No, it was not very popular, but even when our COP program gets back up and running and those monies that are collected from traffic fines, I still would like to see this reserve stay just for that purpose of safe communities, because it could be used anywhere from like helping out the downtown core. It could get into helping fund some stuff for the homeless just to make our community more safer. So I'd hate to see that reserve leave.
So if it did leave, it would be tied into the general tax supported operating reserve. Is that where you said someplace in here where it went or where it would go?
Yeah, the CPO program is part of our general tax support fund.
But Councillor Ford, you're wanting it still
Well,
along.
yeah, I'd like it to align the way it's aligned, because that is under this report here, that is a dedicated reserve. And those funds have to be used for that purpose and not into a general fund.
Any other thoughts on this particular topic?
Do they have to be used for that dedicated fund, or can they go into the general?
So as the policy is written right now, it says dedicated reserves, these reserves are created for a specific purpose and are to be used for that purpose.
Right. So is the money that's in there currently, is that what it has to be dedicated to be used for? But anything later, if you were to say like, okay, so well, what's in that fund now stays there or is used for that, but going forward, that won't be the case?
If I may,
You may.
you correct me if I'm wrong. Council has the discretion to change that purpose of pretty much any reserve they wish. So council could say, no, let's say we had a reserve for, I don't know, we're gonna build a 50-foot tall, 12-foot Davis. And we decide after a while, there's no use building a 50-foot tall, 12-foot Davis. We don't have to say, well, that money's gotta stay in it to build a 50-foot, 12-foot Davis. We can say, we wanna build a really little, nothing. We can put it anywhere we want. Council has that discretion. And all the discussion right now is, do we keep it as the reserve for the safe communities? Or do we put it into general revenue where it can be used for any other purpose that council wishes? Am I correct on that, my understanding?
Correct.
Thank you.
Counselor Ford?
I agree with your statement, sir, Councillor Good. However, getting back to Councillor Scammahorn's comment, I'm not 100% sure, but I would almost suggest that the majority of those funds that are in that reserve did come from the old photo radar. And back in that time, when we first did that, that was not governed by our policy. That was governed by, as what Mayor Manzer had said earlier, that you had to have that dedicated policy in place for those funds from that photo radar. And that was not a council decision to make.
Counselor Good?
That's not my understanding, though I could be wrong. My understanding was that that's where council chose those funds to go. I don't believe that all communities turned their photo radar funds into a safe communities thing. I think they some of them put it into general revenue. So, and I'm not speaking to the benefit of the Safe Communities Fund or against the Safe Communities Fund. What I'm saying is council has the discretion where they wish this money to go. If they want to keep it in a Safe Communities Fund, we just don't change that part of the policy. It stays where it is. It's in a Safe Communities Fund, no problem. If we decide that we have a higher use for those revenues, then we can make that decision. But that's always the purview of council to make at any point in time. So the discussion that we could have is, well, we do nothing, it stays where it is. If we decide to change it into general revenue, we decide what to do with $100 and X thousand dollars. And I know your feeling is you would like to stay there. Other people may feel the same, whatever, but if we do nothing, it stays where it is. Am I correct?
If I may, Madam Mayor, I've seen in the past, seems quite often the case that a specific, very granular reserve gets established as a way, it's almost a response to a problem. So I've previously seen management training reserves where, training wasn't occurring, and so there was a creation of a dedicated reserve, or computer hardware replacement reserves, where it's a very granular level of detail. Again, well intended, but unless you're actually really specifically managing those reserves and focusing on that, I don't know that it always achieves what the intent is.
Yeah, I think before this policy, there used to be reserves like the fire department had some sort of reserve. Another department had some sort of reserve. And, good and bad to that. You knew what was there sort of thing. But sometimes you needed more than was in the reserve. So where did it come from? Well, maybe it came from somebody else's reserve. That kind of thing happened too. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of the comments around the table, but just looking at the proposed motion for the reserves, it's just for information. So this is all coming back to council at a future meeting for decision and discussion. I would almost be willing to, I'd put a motion on the table, but I would like to ask, administration if they could check with maybe Whitecourt and a couple of other of those communities that do use photo radar. Like Whitecourt, I'm almost certain they have it into a safe communities fund, but I'd like to see what other communities are doing with monies that come from photo radar and from traffic enforcement tickets from their COP officers, or does it just go into general? Just for information's sake, so that person can make a proper decision in the future. Like, not disagreeing if council are good, but
I wasn't.
no, just for information though.
Okay, I see our director is badly writing notes there, but Mr. Fisher, comment?
Mayor Mather to address this forward. Sorry, I forgot I had a mic. Mayor Mather to address Oren Ford's, or Council Ford's, question there. I can confirm that when I looked in Ed's and the photo revenue from that was collected from our contractors, and it's not went into our general revenue and was used to offset our protective services budget.
So it did. So being it was used to offset protective services, that's more of a safe, that's like a safe communities initiative.
It was just
In a
within
way.
the general operating.
I think the argument that was made or went around photo radar was because people would say, well, look, it's not making anything any safer. I don't know I've gotten the ticket until I get it in the mail. So it's not altering my behavior. It's not.
Yeah.
So the idea is, well, to counteract that argument, we'll say, well, okay, well, all the money that we get are extra, or a bunch of the money that we get extra will go into a safe communities fund. Therefore, photo radar can still serve the purpose of making the community more safe because we've got this fund in place, everybody. So look how safe we are. We've got a safe communities fund. So photo radar is like you're winning an argument or trying to win an argument that kind of, you know.
It caused, the thought, I guess, was, what do you consider, the education and the safe community part of that? Is it new signage here and there? You know, all that kind of stuff could have come out of that fund perhaps as well. So anyways, what I'm hearing is that admin will take this, back and come forth with, some more information to add to what's already been said on this, aspect, this particular reserve. I wanted to, go back to the mill rate stabilization reserve. So if we had that, the purpose of it was if we, as we have, 2 years ago, needed to find some money so our mill rate didn't have to increase quite so much, it came out of this mill rate reserve, the funds, and then the mill rate didn't have to go up as much. However, if we don't have that, then I guess it's more obvious that it's coming out of the operating aspect of our budget, and it is what it is, sort of thing. Is that kind of the way it would work?
So, Madam Mayor, the purpose of the mill rate stabilization funds, as you said, is to stabilize the tax rate fluctuations, which may occur from year to year. And the source of it is any annually, any unallocated operating surplus would go to that fund. You know, in general, stabilization funds are there so they applies to reduce the volatility and the swings that you'd experience. But this was, again, a fund that we didn't necessarily see having that much value to the organization.
Thank you. Any other comments on any of these? I'm glad to see neighborhood infrastructure reserve renewal is still a possibility there. The reason because I keep eating myself to death that have an actual plan that we have to stick to keep renewing our infrastructure, no matter how many slides, et cetera, we have. We still have to keep other things in mind, but that is only the mayor's comment. CA O'Miller?
Sorry, I just have two comments. If we did, instead of a mill rate stabilization, again, we're just getting better and better at our budgets, so hopefully that will never be required again, but you can always take it out of operating contingency. Or like, Councillor Good said, at any time, some funds could be reallocated from any of the reserves if we found we need to do that. Instead of implying by having a stabilization mill rate reserve, it almost implies that we can't be stable. So, right, it can be directed from other places, yeah.
Any other comments on the prospective reserve policy changes? So these reserves, some of them would also have, thought I read it someplace, maximums sort of thing. Like if I don't know, the building fund ever reached, if it had a maximum, if you reached that, you would quit putting money into it. I'm assuming, I don't know which one would ever reach its maximum actually, but also good.
I was gonna say that, no, they don't, because, that we went through an exercise, a number, that was a long time ago, of collapsing a whole pile of reserves that had been around since most of us have been small children. I mean, they were reserves in name only, they were, I don't know, like, how many curling rocks we want or something like that. It was really, there were a bunch of them, this could be 10, 12 years ago. But no, for example, let's say you had, that all money from X goes to Y. And people just sort of forget about it, and it just keeps on growing and growing and growing, and then the problem that X was trying to address disappears. Well, now you, as you were saying, now you have this great big discussion about what we do with it, there's no cap on it, the money just keeps building up, but those monies then become, once they're specific, until you collapse them, they're tied to that. You can't just yank them out, you can't use them for your own purposes, so you're trying to give council and administration the best opportunity to react to realities that occur during a period of time. You might have a fire, you might have 101 different things that could come up where you need access to dollars, and you, well, I can't touch that because it's got to stay here. I can't touch that because it's got to stay here. So reserves have a purpose, especially in terms of infrastructure, but a lot of other reserves tie your hands to not being able to react as well to the realities that occur in any given set of circumstances. So
I think
that's
maybe-
my feeling anyways.
I think maybe Councillor Ford was trying to aim for that one, the educational aspect of that one reserve. Another question, where would something like, I don't know, major playground infrastructure come in? Or is that the vehicle thing or the building thing, or like where would it go? Like I'm talking major, so it is capital.
That to me would come out of your equipment. We should have a vehicles and equipment reserve.
Yeah.
Your worship, the question regarding to maximizing or capping certain reserves, typically you would on operating. It depends if you'd look for a 3 or a 6 month operating reserve balance. 6 months is nice to have, but I also wanted to say that you would normally tie your reserves to our asset management plan. So once, in a couple of years, when we actually have an asset management plan and things are recorded and we know what our replacements are in future, then you would tie your reserve balances somewhat to that. Because you wouldn't obviously want to go way over 4 times your equipment, for example.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on this whole idea, first of all, of matching up to the financial statements, and second of all, rearranging a few reserves to make them maybe more modern, sensible, I don't know. How's it good?
I'll move the council direct administration to bring the 2023 financial statements in line with the existing reserve policy P1225D and bring such adjustment forward to a council meeting for a formal resolution.
Okay, so that'll be one motion. Any further discussion on the financial statement aspect? Okay, all those in favor of that motion? We have a second, possible motion, if somebody wants to review that, maybe bring it forward.
Sure. I'll move the council direct administration to draft changes to the reserve policy to bring the town in line with its current fund accounting format.
Okay, any further discussion on that aspect? All those in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Mr. Mumford.
Thank you.
Good luck with all those changes. Okay, next up, CAO Miller is going to brief us on council committees.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, this is a briefing note just to bring to council's attention, something that we kind of, come across as we started talking about committees. And it sort of struck us on some of the committees have been rather ad hoc, and we start to be concerned about what the work that they're doing and the potential liability that may be associated with that work. And if our council members are protected legally, and if it is a committee also that council is kind of ad hoc put together, if not only council members, but those other members and members at large are protected as well. So specifically, a couple of committees here that we mentioned was the Peace Regional Healthcare Attraction Committee, the Economic Development Committee, the Peace Regional Community Advisory Committee, and the Peace Regional Mental Health and Addictions Task Force. So we did seek some legal advice, and we had a good long conversation about council committees. And we do have reason to be concerned about a few things. And so it's our intention to bring these committees back to council to get properly established. So we did learn, for example, that while committees, councils can form committees, if they are to do so, they must do so by bylaw. So we know, for example, our community advisory board, or community standards board. Community, your board.
Community
Services Board.
Community Services, oh, something was saying. Community Services
Library.
Board is established by bylaw. Right? So as we went through this, Peace Regional Healthcare Attraction Committee was a committee that was established by council, but it's through terms of reference. And it includes members of council and members from neighboring municipalities and members at large. That committee is collecting funds and soliciting funds. And the risk is low of anything, going awry, but because we are expending funds and because council members are appointed, we need to have that committee formalized by bylaw. So we'll be preparing and bringing something forward. Similarly, the Economic Development Committee was just established through terms of reference and motion. The Peace Regional RCMP Community Advisory Committee, it actually is not a committee. It's confusing, and as we were talking with the lawyer, it's confusing because it is called a committee versus a society. It is actually a society registered. And on this one, we're actually just working through whether there's directors insurance and making sure that all those directors are covered liability wise. And then the Peace Regional Mental Health and Addictions Task Force, as we know, there's a motion here, and I believe this is the motion that first formed or appointed somebody to that committee. And again, as near as I understand, there's nothing formalized, but they are doing quite a bit of advocacy, and there is quite a bit of risk associated with that committee because of the type of advocacy that's going on. So, as I mentioned, this is pretty much just to inform council that these are things that will be coming forward, and I guess seeking direction if the mental health task force is to become a formal committee of council to prepare a bylaw for that committee as well.
So with respect to the mental health task force, so it was a community organized thing, and council appointed somebody to be their rep on it, and so did other councils. Can we just kind of say, okay, community group, you're now going to be a town committee, and we're gonna get a bylaw to make you go for it. Can we just do that?
Well, I think somebody can take ownership. So if one of the other councils, for example, or it needs to become a formal society, we would be happy to assist in that manner too, if the committee, and maybe it's a discussion as well for the committee, we would assist in them becoming a society. And maybe that's the best route because of the advocacy, and then that committee, once becomes a society, would be eligible for casino funding and other grant funding, right? Once you're a society, you can apply for certain funding, but you can't as just a general committee. But otherwise, somebody should take ownership and form a formal committee, so then there's protection for all members at large and anybody on it.
So the idea of councils appointing people to the committee is kind of what is the turning point on this discussion, the fact that we did appoint, so now what kind of idea? Okay, Councillor Good, Councillor Ford.
So if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is we basically bought liability by appointing somebody to the board. So our choices would be to accept the risk. It's one choice. You can always accept risk. I wouldn't advise it, but you always can. Second would be to bring it in line with, make it legitimate, and then you mitigate your risk legally. Or third, you remove any participation. Council can remove participation if council deemed the risk too high. And I'm not making any of the decisions on that. I'm just saying that those would be the kind of available choices. So I don't think we really have a choice, because one of the directions of council is to do what's in the best benefit of the municipality, not necessarily any specific committee. So I'm not really comfortable, now that it's been pointed out, until we mitigate the risk. I think we have to deal with that. And that's including all the other committees mentioned. I'm not specifically even talking about the community, the mental health or whatever. Anything that we've appointed to somebody through that puts up the town of Peace River, corporation of the town of Peace River, risk has to be mitigated.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when the agenda was published, I had gone over this, and I actually had a couple of phone calls with CAO Miller about this today, but more specifically with the RCMP Advisory Committee. So I did provide CAO Miller with this information today. I did email her all the bylaws for that group. So she has that. The RCMP Advisory Committee is a registered not-for-profit. We do submit our financials annually. Actually, Chief Harris does that because he's the Secretary Treasurer right now. So with that being said, that term committee, I do agree. It kind of can get a little bit confusing. I've already talked to our board chair, so it sounds like it's going to come up at our next meeting where they will discuss to see if we can call it like the Peace River or Peace Regional or Peace River RCMP Advisory Board. It more aligns with being a not-for-profit. And then after speaking with our chair today, and that was before he sent the bylaws, but just speaking to CAO Miller's advice on making sure that your directors and your members are protected. Our chair does not think that there is actually a what's the word I'm looking for? Pardon me? Yeah, like a director's insurance. So that's actually a good point, because when you bring up the term soliciting for funds. I have done that on that board. I'm a town representative on that board. However, when I go solicit the funds, I'm actually wearing the hat and representing myself as a RCMP advisory committee member. And I take a letter out that's signed by the chair with their letterhead. And that's how we get our positive tickets for our RCMP and our bylaw officers and peace officers to hand out. Like you could get a $10 gift card from Canadian Tire or Mr. Mike's or whoever donates that year. So I have done that in the past, but I do agree with the director's insurance. I also was involved with PSES for quite a number of years, and we never ever went a year without having a director's insurance policy for the members. So I do agree with those statements.
Okay, Councillor Boychuk, did you have any comments?
Sure, I can clarify a little bit on the mental health task force team. The purpose of the task force team was to get a counselor from each region to collaborate together and brainstorm together to work with their councils to solve issues. It's not an agency upon itself that's advocating in circumstances for money. For example, when we looked at bringing the mobile outreach team to town, we advocated to the Sagatawa to apply for funding to the councils, not the task force to apply. As far as the transitional housing and stuff like that, that's outside of the scope of the task force. We're not working on that as a task force. That's a personal project that I've been working on, so I can see how that kind of gets blurred. But you know, we're pretty open to seeing what's going is working really, really well, and we're working it really well as a region. But it is to collaborate together, to work within the council mandates and to advocate that way. I have had several meetings with ministers outside of the task force, but I have not, I do not believe to this point we've ever asked anybody for any money or anything like that. We're trying to get organizations to ask for money and advocate for organizations, but definitely there's a line here where we need to see how we can work a little bit better. And as it is a new thing, and you know, I'm a little bit unexperienced as far as this goes, but the two main things that we are working on as the task force right now are trying to address the prisoner release, and we've been working with our council on that. And we're looking at bringing a designated site to our one of our local hospitals. So those are the two priorities that we're working on. All those experiencing houselessness and stuff is a whole completely different aspect, and the task force is not interested in that and is not supporting those actions as far as that goes. So it's a little complicated and convoluted, and I understand that, but there's a lot going on and a lot of different aspects of this whole wheel. But the purpose of the task force is the councillors to bring this information back to their councils and work together as a region to solve the major social issues that we've been having. So if we need to register or anything like that, I don't see there ever being a problem, but I'd really like to work on how we can work together a little bit better, especially since the main focus is the town of Peace River and surrounding areas.
So I guess the aspect of, well, first of all, councillors representing their municipality on there. As a councillor, to a certain extent, I don't exactly think we have councillor insurance, but we have the idea that you're doing your best, and therefore the liability part of things follows somehow there, or it doesn't follow. But I guess the CAO's question and maybe council's question to the group is, are they open to forming a society? So it just becomes, okay, that's a society. Councils decide whether or not they designate somebody to be appointed to represent the municipality on the society, or is it just almost easier just to create a bylaw and go forth from that angle? Sorry, Councillor Miller, I'm maybe misrepresenting some stuff here.
No, I didn't put that to council, but thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, based on what Councillor Boychuk had just described, it sounds like it would be best that it's just a committee of council, because committee of council you can say in the bylaw that it includes members of a rep from the different councils, and then if it was to evolve from there, it could then evolve into a society if you're not out seeking funding or anything like that, right? But at least the bylaw committee created by bylaw would protect everybody in that way.
And the more I think about this, it is sort of like the Peace Regional Healthcare Attraction and Retention Committee, except their focus is on the healthcare workforce aspect. And this is on the community aspect of the things that Councillor Wojciech mentioned. So maybe Councillor Wojciech and Councillor Carr go to the committee and bring forth this idea to them and see what they think from there. Councillor Ford?
I just have one more comment that I was talking to CAO Miller about, and I see exactly, the same with, Councillor Good and that liability protection, because all you're trying to do is do the best for your community. But if you look at, the Economic Development Committee, there's certain information that goes, I imagine that goes through that committee that if developments are coming into town and you take that information and give it to somebody and they benefit from that information, you could be in a lot of trouble.
Councillors could, but general public, they also sign up to the committee
Yeah.
with its terms of reference and whatever, but yeah. Like anything, I guess, yeah. Okay, so, anything further? CAO?
No, Your Worship, I said this is just for information, and we'll bring back those things that need to be changed.
Okay, any further questions on this topic? Someone put forth a motion. I can do that. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Where am I? I move that council accept the briefing note regarding council committees for information.
Thank you. And further discussion? All those in favor? It is carried. Thank you. Thank you, CAO Miller. Okay, next up, we have a report. First, the only report is Peace River Aboriginal Interagency Committee updated terms of reference. And as per our discussion just now, so this is one of those community committees out there that kind of sets their own terms of reference and so on. I bring this back to council because I'm the rep on the committee, and they recently spent an extensive amount of time updating their terms of reference, both to cover certain possibilities, and eventually they might be looking at a Friends of Prague kind of type society, basically for fundraising ideas. So, any questions on the terms of reference? Someone would like to move that council accept report 9-1 for information. Councillor Carr, so moves. Thank you. All those in favor? Great. Information items. We have the council information package of February 23rd. Anybody have any comments on anything within that one? Okay. Kind of unfortunate we have, and I know timing on these things is kind of weird. We have to get the council agenda out, but then here's Friday's communication package on March 1. And so I would advise everyone to maybe have a good look at that. Quite a bit of information in it. And maybe someone would move the council accept item 10-1 for information. Councillor Wojciech so moves. All those in favor? Great, it is carried. Key communication items for this meeting. Council timeline for budget 2025. How about the reserves and that whole discussion, updating our reserve methodology? What's that for a word? Anything else somebody would like to put forth?
I think I talked about this last meeting, but now that it's actually on the agenda, in the council communications package, the letter from our seniors community.
Right. And perhaps, so the letter basically, well, Councillor Porter, do you want to speak to the letter?
This letter
Yeah.
or the one that we wanted?
We'll speak to that letter because then we can make a motion to do it.
Okay, yeah, basically, the letter coming from the seniors committee in town is, there's a lot of the seniors that, are feeling unsafe just because of the offenders and the stuff that's happening in our downtown core. They don't feel safe walking in our downtown area, just mental health issues, the addiction issues that we're all aware of. So that the letter, was sent to Dan Williams, our MLA, and our Arnold Pearson, MP of Peace River West Lock. And that was sent to them. And there's a bunch of other people that were CC'd on the letter, just in regards to the seniors and how safe they feel or not safe they feel in the downtown core.
And I believe we had known of this letter in last meeting, and there was a motion put forth to direct administration to respond to the letter. So thank you for bringing it up here formally. Okay, so we've got budget timeline, the reserves, the committee discussion perhaps, and how about council open house on Thursday?
There's some, I saw.
So it starts at 4 o'clock, goes to 6 p.m. It's at the museum. Welcome one and all. There's tidbits there for us to take up too, apparently. Okay, anything else for communication item? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back to close. So we're here at 6:21. Thank you.
Yeah, I heard.